Welcome to Calm, Dreamy Sleep, a peaceful place where stories become dreams. Just relax and slowly close your eyes. Take a gentle breath in and let the day quietly drift away. If this story brings you peace, if you feel calmer, lighter, please subscribe and like. So let's start. There was once a merchant named Laurent. He was a widower, a man who had built his life on the sea, on ships that sailed away and returned heavy with cargo. But one season, the ships did not return. They were lost, every one. And Laurent, who had 6 children, found himself suddenly without fortune. His 3 sons and 2 eldest daughters had grown accustomed to comfort, to fine things, to a life where servants attended their every need. When the money vanished, they did not know how to adjust. But his youngest daughter, whose name was Camille, she was different. She rolled up her sleeves. She learned to bake bread, to tend a garden, to keep chickens. The villagers, who had once looked down on the family's fall, grew to love her. She was willing, she was steady, she was kind. And so, when Laurent had to sell the grand house and move his family to a small cottage on the edge of town, it was Camille who held them together. For 2 years they lived this way. Then a letter arrived. One of Laurent's lost ships had been found, its cargo mostly intact. It waited for him at the port city, a day's journey away. The family rejoiced. The older children spoke of returning to their former lives. Only Camille was quiet. She had come to love the small cottage, the garden, the rhythm of simple work. Still, she was happy for them. Before he left, Laurent asked his children what gifts they would like from the city. The older ones demanded finery, silk shoes, velvet capes, hats with elaborate trimmings, jewelry. Only Camille was silent, thinking. When her father pressed her, she spoke softly. "Father, I have always dreamed of seeing a rose. They do not grow here. If you could bring me one, any color at all, that would be lovely." Laurent smiled at his daughter's simple wish. He promised he would. And so, on a fine morning, he rode away down the sun-dappled forest path. Camille alone stood at the cottage door until he disappeared from sight. She had a strange feeling, a weight in her chest that she could not explain. The journey to the port city was pleasant. Laurent's heart was full of hope. But when he arrived, his dreams crumbled. Word of his good fortune had spread. His creditors had moved quickly. By the time Laurent reached the harbor, his reclaimed cargo had already been distributed to pay his debts. He left the city with nothing. No fortune, no gifts for his children. Nothing but the horse beneath him and the road ahead. He should have stayed in the city overnight, found an inn, rested. But his heart was too heavy. He turned for home immediately, riding into the fading afternoon light. Darkness fell. A storm descended. Lightning and thunder crashed around him. Wind tore through the trees. His horse, frightened, bolted from the main road, carrying him deep into an unfamiliar forest. For hours, Laurent wandered through the howling gale. Then, through the rain and darkness, he saw a wall of stone rising before him. It was the wall around an estate. A tall iron gate stood slightly open. Laurent pushed through, leading his horse up a paved walkway into the swirling dark. Ahead, a massive structure emerged from the gloom. A chateau. Grand. Forbidding. Silent. He tied his horse in a sheltered alcove and approached the front door. He lifted the iron knocker, let it fall. He pushed the door, and it swung inward. Inside, he found himself in a grand entryway. Curved staircases rose on either side. Suits of armor stood guard. Ahead, light glowed around the edges of tall double doors. He walked toward it. The room beyond was warm. A fire roared in a massive hearth. Before it, a table was set for one. Bread, roasted meat, a carafe of wine. No one was there. Laurent waited. Minutes passed. No one came. Hunger overcame him. He sat, ate the bread, then the meat, drank the wine. The fire crackled. The storm raged outside. He grew drowsy. Without meaning to, he fell asleep in the chair. Morning came. Laurent awoke to find the fire burned low, the dishes still on the table, and still no sign of anyone. Embarrassed by his intrusion, he decided to slip away quietly. He stepped into the entryway. Daylight filtered through tall windows. He could see the place properly now. It was magnificent. And neglected. Dust on the staircases, silence everywhere. He found his horse, fed her an apple, led her down the path toward the gate. And then he saw the roses. A pergola stood in the center of an overgrown garden, and there, on a bush unlike any he had ever seen, bloomed the most beautiful pink roses. He remembered his promise to Camille. He pulled out his knife and began to cup them, one, then another, then all of them. He was so absorbed, he did not hear the footsteps. When he turned, a man stood before him. At least, he thought it was a man. Tall, broad, covered in a wilderness of dark hair. His features were overly prominent, his expression fierce. The man's voice when it came, was low, like a growl. "What do you think you are doing?" Laurent stammered an explanation. He thought no one lived here. He thought the roses would not be missed. He had promised roses to his daughter. The beastly man listened in stony silence. When Laurent finished, the man spoke again. "You ate my dinner. You slept in my home. All of this I was willing to overlook. But you have taken every bloom from my most precious rosebush. It was planted by my mother. It is priceless to me." Laurent's heart sank. He admitted he could not pay. He had nothing. The man regarded him coolly. "Then you must work off your debt." "I need a laborer." "But sir, I have 6 children at home. I cannot stay." "Then someone in your family must take your place. Take your roses. They are no good to me now. Return to your family. Make your arrangements. I will expect you, or your replacement, within a week. If you do not appear, I will find you." With that, the man turned and strode toward the chateau. Laurent watched him disappear, then mounted his horse and rode home with a heavy heart. When Laurent arrived home, his children greeted him eagerly. They searched his bags for gifts. He handed them roses. That night, around the kitchen table, he told them everything. The lost fortune, the storm, the chateau, the beastly man, the debt. His older children were outraged. How would they manage without him? Only Camille was silent. Finally, she spoke. "Father, I will go." Laurent's eyes filled with tears. He protested, but Camille was firm. "You are needed here. I can be spared. I have learned to cook, to clean, to manage a household. Let me go in your place." There was no reasoning with her. She pressed her rose between the pages of a book to keep it always. And a few days later, father and daughter set out together on the road to the chateau. The journey took 2 days. On the second afternoon, the sky turned gray. Wind blew fallen leaves across their path. The forest grew dense and dark. And then they arrived. Camille stared at the chateau. It was enormous. Soaring walls, tall windows, an air of ancient silence. The gardens were overgrown, but beautiful even in neglect. She felt, strangely, that the place was waiting for her. Laurent knocked. The door opened, not by the beastly man, but by a boy, perhaps 13 years old, dressed simply. He looked at them with frank curiosity. "Is one of you the new servant?" Camille stepped forward. The boy nodded. He told Laurent he could leave her things in the foyer and go. Father and daughter embraced. Then Laurent climbed onto his horse and rode away. Camille watched until the forest swallowed him. Then she turned and walked through the doorway into her new life. The boy's name was Gabriel. He showed her to a room, not in the attic as she had expected, but in the grand east wing. A beautiful bedroom with a canopied bed, a window seat, a fireplace. "The Baron will see you tomorrow," Gabriel said. "For now, rest." That night, alone in the vast silence of the chateau, Camille dreamed. She walked through dark hallways, following a large dog. It disappeared through door after door. Finally, she came to a room where the dog had vanished. She looked inside. Instead of a dog, she saw a man sitting at a desk. He began to turn toward her, and then she woke. Morning came. Gabriel brought breakfast. Then he led her to meet the Baron. The study was the same room where her father had eaten his stolen meal. The man who rose to greet her was startling. Tall, heavy-browed, covered in thick hair. His features seemed too large for his face. He looked beastly. But Camille kept her face calm. She dipped her head politely. He gestured for her to sit. "You are the one who has come to work off your father's debt. Are you familiar with household tasks?" Camille nodded. The man seemed pleased. He lifted a heavy ring of keys from a nearby table. "As you can see, I have very little help. Gabriel runs errands. His mother brings bread and eggs, but there is no one else to manage the estate. It is too much work for just Gabriel and me, but we will make do." He paused, as if waiting for a response. Camille said nothing. She was overwhelmed by the thought of caring for this enormous place alone. But she did not say so. The man continued. "These keys will open most rooms. If you need something Gabriel cannot get, speak to me. Otherwise, I am not particular. Make as many decisions for yourself as you wish. I spend most of my time in my study or in the library." He stood. The interview was over. Camille rose, took the heavy keys, and nodded. As she reached the door, he called after her. "Dinner is at 7. I would be very sensible if you would join me." Camille nodded again and left. In the echoing front hall, she stood bewildered. The keys lay heavy in her palm. They felt ancient, important. Gabriel appeared from the shadows. "Would you like a tour?" She gratefully accepted. Gabriel showed her everything, room after room, covered in dust sheets. Corridor after corridor, lined with closed doors. The chateau was a maze of forgotten spaces. But the library took her breath away. A vast room with ceilings so high they seemed to disappear into shadow. Bookshelves lined every wall, stretching all the way up. Rolling ladders perched at intervals, ready to slide across and grant access to any volume. Thousands of books, tens of thousands, spines in every color. And in the center of the room, 2 worn leather armchairs beside a fireplace. The Baron spends most of his time here, Gabriel whispered. Camille understood why. That first day, she and Gabriel cleaned the front hall and the kitchen. It felt good to work, to make things shine again. She sent Gabriel to town with a list of supplies. Then she stood alone in the vast kitchen and began. By evening, she had prepared a simple meal: roasted chicken, fresh bread. She returned to her room to freshen up, put on her nicest dress, and made her way to the dining room. The dining room was grand. A crystal chandelier hung like a canopy of stars. 2 places were set at one end of the long table. She was the first to arrive. Moments later, the Baron appeared in the doorway. He paused, nodded, and motioned for her to sit. They ate in companionable silence. "I can see you have been working hard," he said finally. "Gabriel has borne a heavy burden these past years. I am glad you are here to help." Camille nodded. "Please," he added, "you may call me Antoine. I am lord of nothing now." Only this chateau and its pile of dusty relics. He smiled sadly. "Would you like me to clean the library tomorrow?" Camille asked. Antoine considered. "That would be fine. And you should feel free to borrow any book you like. My library has an incredible capacity to provide any book you have ever heard of." It is rather magical in that regard. Camille was surprised by his kindness, by his gentle words. She looked at him across the table, and for just a moment, she did not see a beast at all. She blinked, and he was himself again. But something had shifted. Days turned into weeks. Camille threw herself into her work. She organized, she cleaned, she made the kitchen warm and alive again, and she read. Every evening, after dinner, she would curl up by the fire in her room with a book from the library. Antoine recommended authors she had never heard of: philosophers, poets, playwrights. They talked about what she read, about what he was reading, about ideas. She noticed things. When she passed a mirror, sometimes she would see a normal-looking man reflected behind her. She would turn, and Antoine would be there, looking exactly as he always did. She began to wonder if the mirrors were playing tricks, or if something else was happening. One afternoon, she found a locked room. It was clearly a lady's chamber, a dressing table covered in perfume bottles and powder jars, a wardrobe full of silk dresses from decades past, a chest of drawers filled with glittering jewelry. In a small velvet box, a ring with a deep blue sapphire. Camille closed the drawer quietly. She did not want to seem like a thief. She locked the room again and left it as she had found it. But she never forgot the ring. Spring came. The gardens, which Camille had hired villagers to clear before winter, burst into bloom. Antoine's mother's rosebush flowered abundantly. They began taking their books outside, reading together in the pergola. One evening, over dinner, Camille asked him how he had come to be so alone. Antoine was silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, he told her. Many years ago, I lived here with my mother. She was beautiful, kind. Everyone loved her. That rose bush, it was hers. When she became ill and passed away, I was left alone. I was young, foolish, vain. I squandered the family fortune on extravagant parties. I neglected the estate. I treated people badly. One night, during a lavish party, my servant told me a woman was at the door begging for food. I could not be bothered. I told him to send her away, to tell her to get employment. Before he could, she pushed through the door. She looked at me, and she cursed me. She said I would spend my days shunned and unloved, and that the secret to my release could only be found in humanity. Camille frowned. Humanity? What did she mean? Antoine shrugged. That is the riddle I have wrestled with for decades. My library is full of the wisest writings humanity has ever produced. I have read them all. I have learned. I have grown. But I am still here, still alone. Camille looked at him across the table. She thought about how different he was from the man in his story. How kind, how thoughtful, how patient. She wondered if he could see it himself. A letter arrived from Camille's father. Her eldest sister was to be married. Would the Baron permit her to attend? Camille brought the letter to Antoine. He set down his book and looked at her with a sad smile. Of course you must go. Take all the time you need. As she thanked him, she saw it again. For just a moment, a handsome man looking back at her. She blinked. He was himself, but the image lingered. The wedding was pleasant. Her family greeted her warmly. They admired the fine clothes she had bought with her salary. They were grateful for the money she had sent, which had helped secure her sister's match. But Camille felt strange, out of place. The cottage seemed small. Her siblings' concerns seemed petty. She found herself thinking of the chateau, of the library, of Antoine. When her father dropped her at the gates on her return, she felt relief. That relief turned to dismay when Gabriel met her at the door. Nothing has been the same since you left, he whispered. The Baron has not left the library. He barely eats. Camille found Antoine in the library. Books were everywhere, piles on the floor, stacks on every surface. Empty glasses lined the tables. Antoine sat slumped in a chair, unshaven, unchanged. He looked up when she entered. His expression was one of sheepish relief. For a moment, she saw only a tired man, a man who had missed her. Then she blinked, and he was himself again, but the feeling stayed. It took only a few days to set everything right. The Baron's mood lifted immediately upon her return. Gabriel begged her privately never to go away again. He cannot manage without you. Summer arrived. Another letter came. Camille's other sister was to be married. This time, Camille was torn. She wanted to see her family,
but she could not bear to leave Antoine again. She proposed an unusual plan. "Come with me," she said. "Take a room at the inn. Attend the wedding with me." Antoine was aghast. "Have you not seen how people react to me?" But Camille insisted. This village was far from here. No one knew him by reputation. Surely they would see him as she did. He refused. Again. Finally,
Camille said she would not go without him. Faced with causing her to miss her sister's wedding, Antoine reluctantly agreed. Camille sent Gabriel to the tailor, a new suit, modern, dignified. They set out on a fine summer morning. The forest was green and alive. Sunlight filtered through the canopy. At first, Antoine was silent, resigned. But after a few miles, they fell into their usual conversation about books, about ideas, about everything. Camille smiled to herself. Looking at him from the side, she could have sworn she was sitting next to a charming gentleman. They arrived at twilight. Her family greeted them, but her older siblings stared, whispered, snickered. Camille's cheeks burned with shame. Antoine said nothing. He simply smiled politely, then departed for the inn. The next day, at the wedding, it was worse. The villagers who had once been so kind to Camille now stood at a distance, whispering, pointing, laughing. Her family ignored them completely. And then, two men nearby spoke loudly enough to be heard. "He may have money, but he will never convince anyone to marry him with a face like that. Sad state of affairs when you have to court your own maid." Camille set down her cup. She walked to the center of the gathering. "I convinced the Baron to come with me because I thought you were good people. I was sure his kindness and character would make it obvious to you all that he is not the beast people make him out to be. I was wrong. None of you are worthy of his notice." She turned to face Antoine and stopped. Where he had stood, a handsome man now stood, dignified, kind-faced, smiling at her with gratitude. No matter how many times she blinked, the vision did not change. The excess of hair was gone. The overly prominent features had softened. He was as handsome as any man she had ever known. The other guests, as if nothing had happened, began to greet Antoine warmly, smile at Camille. The whispers stopped. The pointing ceased. It was as if the entire embarrassing episode had never occurred. A veil had lifted, for good. All those years, Antoine had sought the answer in his library, the wisdom of humanity, philosophers, poets, scientists. But he had misunderstood. The curse was not broken by reading about humanity. It was broken by becoming human. The decades of solitude, of reading, of learning, had slowly transformed him. He had become kinder, more generous, more patient, more forgiving. He had become the man who won Camille's heart. That was the missing piece. That was the secret to his release. Not long after, they sat together under the pergola. Twilight, summer evening, the scent of roses drifting on the air. Antoine's mother's bush bloomed abundantly around them. Antoine reached into his pocket. He pulled out the ring, the sapphire ring Camille had secretly admired in his mother's dressing table. You were the only person who took the trouble to get to know me as I really was. He smiled. After all, I think you have adequately demonstrated that you are more than qualified to manage this chateau. Camille laughed. She allowed him to slip the ring onto her finger. It sparkled in the fading light. Before summer ended, they exchanged vows in the courtyard. The rose bushes perfumed the air. Birds sang from the treetops. Gabriel stood nearby, grinning. Camille looked at Antoine with a grateful heart. She felt a strong sense of belonging in a place she had once found so foreign. This was no longer the same desolate chateau where she had arrived just over a year ago. Through kindness, patience, and the search for wisdom, they had both found something precious. They had found each other, and they had found home. And now, our journey gently comes to an end. We leave them there, in the twilight garden, surrounded by roses and the promise of many peaceful years ahead. We leave the chateau, no longer lonely, no longer silent, but warm with life and love. We leave the library, still full of wisdom, still waiting to be explored. But the feeling we carry with us tonight, that feeling does not fade. It stays here, in this quiet place between waking and dreaming, in the warmth behind your closed eyes, in the slow rhythm of your breath. You have traveled. Let your shoulders soften. Let your hands rest open at your sides. Let your breath grow slower, deeper, easier with each passing moment. There is nothing you need to hold on to tonight. No worries to carry, no plans to make, no past to revisit. Only this stillness, only this warmth, only this quiet breath, moving in and out, like gentle waves upon a silver shore. The story is over, but the peace it brought remains. So drift now. Drift like a petal on a summer breeze. Drift like candlelight in a quiet room. Drift like a heart, finally, completely at home. Good night, sweet dreams.